have been optimizing landing pages since 2003 for different businesses. I've worked for Audible, I've worked for Lower My Bills, I've worked for Lending Tree, and I'm now working for Freedom. I'll let Jason introduce himself, but we are lucky to have him because he is a different twist on landing page testing, and Claire actually runs a business that does a zillion tests a year, so I'll let these two introduce themselves.
My name is Jason Owen. I'm the VP of Marketing for a company called Progrexion. We own credit repair businesses and credit.com. Been doing landing page testing since, call it, mid-2000s. Previous to this, I was running marketing for Vivint, and then previous to that, I was COO of HomeInsurance.com.
I am Claire Vaux. I'm the CEO of Experiment Engine. We help companies scale their conversion optimization efforts. So we work with companies like Starbucks, DMV.org, The Honest Company, who want to scale to hundreds or thousands of tests per year. So we help provide software and services that allow teams to do a lot of high-volume testing.
Right. So, show of hands, how many people here are landing page testing today? Right. So, let's start at the basics then. Which is great, because that's what this is really designed to do. So we've done this presentation in 3 parts. First are kind of the basics, what to test. The second are then examples of tests that were done. And then the third part is what you can do if you have a part of your business is calls, and how you actually take web traffic and convert that into a call, which should have a higher conversion rate than a web lead. So, why to test? I'll go through these quickly. This is just an experiment from before and after. 44% lift in conversion rate. So when you think about that, if you're spending $1, and you're making $1.50, 44% lift of that is going to take you almost up to $1.75. That's a significant increase. Here a test has 83% lift. And, you can just see you took out the picture, you put in more text, and you got a lift. You don't always get 83% lift. I mean, magically it happens. It happens a lot at the beginning when you start to test, but you do see those numbers. And here's an 87% lift. And before, there was a lot of text in a form on the side. They took out a lot of text. They made it easier for people to know what they were doing, and conversion was up. So let's take this into how does this impact affiliate programs. So the first experience I had with landing pages when I was an affiliate manager at Audible in 2004, I put up a landing page in the affiliate program, and literally I got a 25% increase in conversion rates. So what I ended up happening was my EPC, which is, a number, it's also called ECPC, because CJ has to call things different, but that number increased. My affiliates were making more money for the same amount of traffic, and lots of affiliates came and wanted to run my offer who were not running my offer before when they saw this increase. So it's key to affiliates to be able to give them a landing page that converts and lets them monetize better. We actually lowered our affiliate commissions after this and ended up making more money for the business, because we had the leverage to do so, because they were still making a lot of money off our offer. Anybody have questions about this? Anything so far? Okay, next. So these are 5 slides on what to test. So if you take things away from here are basic ideas of what to test. So the first is test your headline and your subheadline. Second is test your hero shot. The image makes a big difference. I mean, you can test whether you put an image on your page or not, but if an image works, definitely test images, because the hero shot makes a huge difference. Supporting information, your bullets, what are in there, how they're laid out. Easy to scan. So you've got 8 seconds. Somebody clicks on a page, clicks through to a landing page, and you usually got 8 seconds before they bounce if they're not going to start. So just make sure that in that 8 seconds they can read everything they need to know. And finally, the call to action, which is a big one, like test your buttons, test your messaging on your buttons, test your color, test your size. I think in one job, in the end, we counted up how many buttons I tested, and it was like 145 during the time I was there. So I'm going to hand this over to Claire because she actually has real data to talk about.
Yeah, so those are really high-level things that are good areas to focus for landing page optimization. And a lot of times teams come to us and they're like, really, can my headline or my sub-headline or the fact that my copy says, submit, buy now versus buy securely versus buy securely now, can that really make that big of a difference? And so what we did, it actually was just published on the Experiment Engine blog today, is look at thousands of tests and really see quantitatively what is the most effective type of test you're going to run. So if you are new to conversion optimization or A/B testing and you're looking to get the kind of quickest, highest level return, there's actually data that supports focusing on copy, particularly for lead gen. Is a really high leverage opportunity for testing. And so the areas that Beth outlined, headlines, value propositions, and honestly call to actions, we see have the highest what we call win rate. You're not always going to see every conversion optimization test you run win, but more likely than not, a copy change test is going to win more frequently relative to maybe a design change test, a functional change test, or even a combination of those two. So don't dismiss the kind of infinite opportunities you have, particularly in the affiliate and lead gen space, to really optimize how your value propositions and your call to actions are presented to your customers, because they do make a big difference.
And here are kind of 2 points to note. Don't know why. Okay, so I'm sorry. So this was a test we ran at Bill's, and we took this. I wanted to point out, we have no navigation here, and our trusted logo. So those are 2 more things to test that actually move the needle too. I don't know why this is flowing back and forth.
And what I would like to say, kind of at a high level, is we've outlined things to test, but a good approach to what you should test are the principles outlined here, which are defining focus. So having your users focus on the primary action you want them to take. So removing the navigation bar reduces distraction on secondary actions you don't necessarily want your user to take, like leaving the page that they're on. So focusing on really zeroing in on what the action your user wants to take, and then instilling trust or reducing anxiety, which is where I think the trust logos come to. And you can apply that to copy changes. You can apply those 2 principles to design changes. They're 2 really great guiding lights. Am I reducing distraction and increasing focus? And am I reducing anxiety and increasing trust?
Great. And then I think the last thing, and when you talk about the big picture, make sure to test mobile differently from desktop. For instance, you can test, should your site be responsive? Should you have 2 different experiences? Those are all things to test. Mobile traffic is less expensive. If you can make mobile traffic work for you and you can get a landing page that converts it well, you're just going to make more money. This is yours.
Yeah, so I think those are really great high-level areas to focus on, and the ones that we see when you run lots of tests be very, very effective, and great places to start with your conversion optimization program, since it sounds like a lot of you are going to start this new. Some advanced tips you can do that you probably wouldn't think of right off the box is really thinking about placement. So left-right swaps can actually make a very, very big difference. So on this form, we just swapped left and right, and it was a 15% increase in conversion just by putting the form on the left. It was easier for the user to scan. They found the call to action easier. And so that was just a simple form. You can think top, bottom. You can stack your fields next to each other. But positioning is a really great, easy thing to test that can actually have a lot of opportunity from a conversion standpoint. Another one to think about, and this goes back to, I think, that principle of focus and reducing anxiety, is really breaking up your forms or your conversion points. And so you can see in this form, it was actually the form from before. We thought, gosh, you land on that page, and there's a lot of anxiety because there's a lot of information you have to figure out. So when you hit that page, you not only have to evaluate, is this the right offer for me, but do I have all the information that they want me to have right off the bat? And do I feel like I have enough time and energy to complete that entire form? And so our goal with this was to essentially reduce anxiety around this form by presenting the user with more bite-sized steps to fill out across the flow. So breaking out these questions into step-by-step forms, which I know, Beth, you guys have a lot of step-by-step forms, can really be an effective way to get user from point A to point B or Z, depending on how many steps you have, and really reduces the kind of incremental anxiety that they have. The other thing you can think about is early capture of valuable information. So putting your email capture as testing your email capture is the first thing and only thing you ask the user for. One, can reduce anxiety because it's less information to fill out right off the bat, but then two, you guys have captured an email, which is something that you can monetize or market to on an ongoing basis. And so there's both customer-facing benefits to doing something like this and business-facing benefits. So you can think of a lot of ways to test something like this on form submissions. And then I think this one is really underutilized, and we're seeing a lot of success with this, and I think it applies to the phone call stuff that we're speaking of as well. Little changes can drive lift, and this change on this page, basically we just replicated the call to actions at the bottom of the page. So we thought, okay, this page it's not even that long of a page if you look at it, but we thought, okay, the big call to actions at the top, what if you scroll down and read the benefits? You have to scroll back up to take the action. And so we thought, well, we'll just make that easy on the user and pop those CTAs. They're the exact same ones at the top of the page, at the bottom of the page, and it was a 5% increase in conversion. And we've seen this a lot on long form content pages that are trying to drive a conversion action as well, be very effective. And we sort of think of top, middle, and bottom, sort of repeating call to actions as a really effective test. So we were working with a client who was trying to do chat and phone call lead capture on a landing page, and they had their phone number big and bright in the header, they had their chat big and bright in the header, and then they had this great, fantastic long form content. And then at the very bottom, they had the phone number again. And that's great, but you have to scroll through like 15 paragraphs of content in between, and in the meantime, you lose those call to actions. So we just intermittently inserted additional CTAs, the same ones that are in the header, the same ones that are in the footer, and we're driving, hundreds more leads per week just by adding the call to action in the middle of the content. And so repeating things that are working effectively across different areas of your page, very easy to do and can drive a lot of value out of your landing pages.
Okay, so this is yours.
Great. So before I start, nobody raised their hand earlier when you asked a question on what we're responsible for. How many people here actually own their testing organization or testing team or own testing, I guess? Okay, and then just give me an idea what the rest of you are. Are you interested in testing, starting testing? Got it? Shaking some heads? Okay. How many people own their P&L? Got it. Okay. So I've been doing this for a really long time, and one of the things that I've learned is it's not necessarily thinking about it from the conversion lift all the time, but it's also thinking about it from the economics of your business. And so I kind of wanted to start with this question, which is if you're able to double the website conversion through testing, what is the CPA of those additional sales that you would get? Anybody? 0. So if you think about it, if you run a big business, let's just use round numbers, and let's say I get $1 million a month in revenue, and I can double the output through testing, which it really isn't, it's completely feasible. You literally could double your business, but all of that additional revenue is high margin because you have no marketing acquisition cost. You guys with me? So when you think about testing and what's the most important marketing channel that you can actually utilize to kind of increase EBITDA, it's really testing. It's not opening up new channels. It's not negotiating with publishers. It's not going out and finding the next incremental lead. It's really doing more with the traffic that you already buy will actually make you the most in terms of a profit and return on your investment. And I don't know if...
Yeah, and it allows you to be more competitive in the paid search space as well, because if your average cost per acquisition goes down, then you become more competitive when you're bidding on expensive terms.
Yeah, so
Well, and that's every channel. So, you get more competitive. You can be more competitive in Facebook. You can be more competitive in native, whatever channels you're in. If you're converting better.
and when you think about things like search, like we're talking about up here, after you've paid for the click, every other cost, all of your marketing costs are sunk. So sometimes we think about what's our CPL, but it really should be almost thinking about what's your CPC, because that's the only output in terms of money that you have. And if a lot of you guys are performance marketers, once you've paid for the click, you've essentially expanded all of your marketing dollars right there. You just have to do more with that click. And so we'll start from here, but that's how I think about it. And then the one other thing I'll give you guys, if you're starting about thinking about testing, I don't hire marketers anymore at all to look at this stuff. This is stats, math, STEM students, economics degrees. I'd rather take a guy or a girl, a woman, man, sorry. And I'd rather take somebody that is highly competent in analytics and math and teach them how to actually go look at marketing than trying to take a marketer and trying to teach them math. Why is that? This is all the math that goes behind this stuff.
There are lots of marketers that are pretty well versed on mathematics and analytics.
Totally fair. I'm saying right out of the gate, if I was going to go hire somebody, I would look at mathematics degrees before I look at marketing degrees. And to be honest, the math behind it gets super complicated as you actually start thinking about multiple outputs. If you're talking about, I have chat on a website, I have phone calls on a website, I have lead forms on a website, and then I have people that also never actually fully submit the form. You're not talking about a mutually exclusive one-time event that you're trying to lift on one point. You're actually talking about 4 different outputs, and the kind of the manipulation of those 4 different outputs. You could actually drive a few more calls, but actually depress your leads way really, really far, and that might actually be a good thing. But the data gets so complex in looking at it that I'd rather have people that have math degrees look at it or start learning how to look at it than hiring just a marketer who might have, quote, paid search experience. That's my 2 cents.
Thinking that if you need that person to do something else, then it's always a good idea to have a marketer because he understands the whole marketing flywheel. Whereas if you just get that kind of person, they only focus on that.
So the question is it better to have a marketer that can actually look at the entire kind of marketing ecosystem versus somebody that can just look at that? And this is maybe where I get a little bit neurotic. The overwhelming majority of the teams that I have that work for me, my team is probably 40 people. The overwhelming majority of them actually come with math or economics backgrounds, stats versus marketers. I have a great agency that's a partner with us, 3Q Digital, and they help us a lot on kind of balancing out it, but we look at it from an analytics perspective. And I can tell you that the gains that I've had in all the companies that I've worked for have come from getting much more specific in the math than anything having to do with marketing. So, okay, so next slide. All right, so not all testing is created equal. So what does this mean? So Beth immediately or earlier said, hey, take a look at mobile. So this is a spreadsheet that you can't read at all because it's too small. But essentially what this is an outline of is the 40 different segments that I test. So I don't think about it from, hey, is this 5% better on my website? Technically, my website really doesn't exist because each individual segment of traffic has a different experience that it goes along with. And it might be a very small one, and it might be a very large one. So for example, we think about it as Google paid search, branded terminology on desktop is a segment, and we test that very different from Facebook. Mobile has a very different output. And so by looking at those things and kind of taking them down one level, as we were talking about math, by kind of getting it from just mobile and desktop into the actual where the traffic flows come from, we've been able to kind of make incremental gains across the board. So when we talk about doubling, your effective output of your landing pages to increase EBITDA, really it's about taking those micro segments and making them more micro segments and then finding out how to actually increase those ones better because they do perform very differently. I've had non-brand landing pages that look on desktop that look absolutely hideous, but you get 25 and 30% gains. And so it's allowing the data to kind of speak for itself and to make sure that you're looking at the data correctly to understand where you need to go next. So, any questions? Okay. Yep. Do we use any dashboard tool to handle all of the data? Yeah, we do. So I should say we're an Adobe shop, so we use Test and Target as one of our tools. But we do a lot of work inside of Excel, to be honest. We use Tableau for kind of some dashboarding stuff, but most of the heavy lifting gets done in Excel, and I'll explain why in a minute when we kind of get into the phone call stuff.
And I'm going to have to chime in here. We're trying to replace whatever he's doing in Excel with a SaaS platform for managing this sort of thing because it makes me cringe when people are running really sophisticated programs out of a spreadsheet. So there are dashboarding tools available, and you may talk to me about them.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, when when your analyst computers start crashing because they need more processors, that you probably should stop doing stuff in Excel and actually figure something else out. But that was a fantastic answer to that. But
He was just teeing me up.
great. So next question. All right. Okay. Basic tips or advanced tips. Drive calls before. So, like I said, I work in the credit repair space. LexingtonLaw.com is one of our websites. It's actually a law firm. We have about 50% market share in helping people repair their credit. And this was a landing page that was kind of the original snapshot of what we had when I started. And a couple of the things we're primarily an inbound call center. So we take a lot of inbound traffic from our sites. And one of the things you'll notice in the middle of the page is it says get started online in our services. We have a phone number in the upper right in kind of the middle of the page. And again, you can see we've got some of the same buttons that Claire was discussing around how, scrolling landing pages have the buttons go down. It does work. I think it's super effective. And so this is the before snapshot. And then if we go to the next one, so this is a new one that we just put live, and it kind of replaced a lot of the small copy. Can you actually toggle back and forth for me? And you'll see another thing that we did, tons of copy in the middle, lots of options, and then going back, what we did is we really simplified it down. And the hypothesis here was, hey, we're an inbound call center. We gave equal weight to filling out a form online or a phone call. And if you ask any of my teams that work for me, I have 5 words that are the best 5 words in testing in my world, which is make the phone number bigger. And you think it's a joke, but I guarantee that number in the middle, I actually rally on our team and I tell them it's too small. And you see crazy gains just by making the phone number bigger. And my advice to you guys is make it bigger on your site if you're driving calls. And then when you think it's big enough, actually double the size again, and then it'll be big enough. And I'm serious, like it's crazy how much you can do. But, I worked previously with another company that was inbound, very large company. We had 7,000 employees, and over the period of 12 months, we were able to grow our kind of conversion or the output of website testing 100%. And so if you're in companies with 7,000 employees and big companies like that, you can think about how that trickles down from a monetary perspective. So again, make the phone number bigger.
And I have to put in 4 words myself, which apply to your landing page, which is make the button orange. Also very effective.
Yeah. And you'll see in this one, we got rid of the sign up online. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to see what happened if we drive more calls and depress signups and see if the total kind of conversion we look at it from, call it click conversion. So what's the total clicks in versus the output? Because you really can't look at it as calls over online signups because those two things aren't created equally. And so that's where the math gets a little bit complicated. And if an online signup costs less than having a call center agent answer the phone, there's math behind that too and your kind of sales cost that you have to start taking into consideration as well. That's why I stress highly having mathematics people start taking a look at this. And then to be really honest, I'll bang on Adobe for a second. I hope nobody from Adobe's here. Test and Target does a really poor job of actually taking multiple outputs into consideration. And so I don't use a tool like Claire's, not yet at least, but if I'm using these spreadsheets, I probably should be. And so we actually have to take a lot of the data and aggregate it ourselves afterwards because they don't have simple inputs for thinking about things like phone calls. And so it makes it super, super complex. Who here has a phone call-based business? Actually, let me ask you a better question. Who here actually has a phone number on their website? So one of the things that goes missed a lot is that people don't understand that if you have a phone number on your website but you're not testing for it, and you do something on your landing page, it can actually affect your phone calls, regardless if you're testing for it or not. And so any output that a consumer can do, you have to take into consideration. Otherwise, you're really not thinking about it as a true test. So if people that have a phone number on their website, tools that we use personally, we do a lot of work with Invoca. I think that their data is fantastic behind phone calls. They give you a lot of customization, so you can push a lot of custom events into the phone fields. I think they're great. I use Test and Target today because we're an Adobe shop and we do a pretty sophisticated testing. But I would say if you're starting out, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, Claire, too, I think Optimizely for people that are starting out is great. It's very simple to use, and
They have good click-to-call integrations.
and they've got good integrations, probably more effective than some of the Adobe stuff. But if you're starting out, I probably would start there. But just being very conscientious of if I make the lead form better, but I have a phone number on that page, you have to think about it as total output. So, all right. And then
So can I actually stop and ask you a question that I was going to do at the end of this? So, given, I'm sorry.
I have a quick question. Are the phone numbers intentionally different? Like, are you testing? I actually own the phone number 800-123-4567. Well, there's an 888 at top. Oh, that's just an oversight. Yeah, no, we do. So that's a good point. If we're running a very specific test, we will use separate numbers to track separate call types. Invoca does have technology that allows you to actually see which number gets called on a page, which is important if you're trying to look at long form landing pages and things of that nature. In this case, this was a mock-up that I just took from our design guy.
Okay, so for both of you, if you were starting from scratch on this, I understand Optimizely is a good place to go. How would you start? What would you do?
So there's a pretty basic approach that we take with people who are starting conversion optimization programs. And so it starts with making sure that you have, we call it infrastructure and readiness. So you have to have the infrastructure to test, which means you have to have a testing technology. Optimizely is a great one for starting tools. There are other ones out there. Visual Website Optimizer is pretty accessible. If you already are an Adobe shop, Adobe can be a really great tool for you. And then Google Analytics is also getting into the A/B testing technology. And then there's lots of open source stuff. So you have to have the actual technical capacity to split your traffic, serve up these tests, and get basic analysis out of it. In tandem with that, what you've been saying, you really need to make sure that your analytics and your core data are in a place where you can pair it with this testing data and actually make good business decisions. And so if your analytics are a mess and you can't even tell what your conversion rate is now or what the blended value of a conversion given calls and web forms are, you want to clean that up first. So you want to have good analytics data and you want to have a testing tool. And that is your baseline for what you need to have from an infrastructure standpoint to start testing. And then the next thing is really research and readiness, which is what are my biggest opportunities for testing? And the simplest way to do that is look at what are your highest traffic pages, what are your pages with the highest bounce rate or lowest conversion rate, or where are there changes in your traffic composition that are having pretty dramatic shifts. So if you're shifting significantly into mobile, that can be a really big opportunity from a testing perspective. So finding areas on your site to focus on testing and then building out what we call a testing roadmap, which is a hypothesis-driven approach to what you're going to test. And you can take sort of the tactics that Beth outlined with some of the kind of high-level strategy things. So how can we look at CTAs and focus on trust? How can we look at CTAs and focus on eliminating distraction? How can we make the phone number bigger and then bigger again? How can we make the button oranger and then oranger again? And you can start to build out basically a roadmap of hypotheses, and we frame those in. If we do X, we expect to see Y as measured by Z. So if we make the phone number 3 times bigger, we expect to see a 15% lift in calls as measured by our click-to-call data. And that will give you, and so you build out a hypothesis of testing, and then you go after it, and as soon as you run a test, and as soon as that one ends, you run the next test, and you really build an ongoing program, and you focus on the discipline of getting testing done every week or every month, and you will see the results. So that's the kind of high-level approach that we take.
Yeah, so I'll take the approach of like the in-house person or if I'm any one of you guys. And so let's say that I get hired at company A tomorrow and there's no testing at all. What would I do? So first things first is I would get a good handle of where all of my money is coming from, to be honest. And it would be, you've got channels that everyone here runs, whether it's paid search, whether it's Facebook, whether it's direct mail, I have no idea, and you push to a website. I would understand where the volume comes from. I'm sure each one of you is an 80-20 rule where you've got kind of your game that's 80% of your business that's really, really large. I would start by saying, okay, well, if Google paid search brand traffic is my winner in terms of where all my traffic is coming in from, I would say, okay, well, that's where we're going to start testing because that's where I can get the biggest bang for my buck. I would most likely, having not done this in a little bit, I would probably buy Optimizely because I think it's really cheap out of the gate, and so you really don't have to prove much of an ROI.
Not that much anymore.
It's not?
No, but
$100 a month or something like that to start?
no.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Way cheaper.
No, it's way more expensive.
Oh, way more expensive. Okay, got it. I don't know. What's the most inexpensive tool that you can start with?
I would say Visual Website Optimizer is still less expensive in the market. There's some open source tools, and then I think there's Convert.com. You can look and compare. There's definitely a group of people that optimize.
They have like the A/B testing capabilities already on the landing page.
Oh, like Unbounce?
Oh, Unbounce.
Oh yeah, you can. That actually, if you're just testing landing pages and you want to go quick and dirty, is a really great place to start.
So yeah, like I said, I haven't bought a tool like this in a little bit. And then the other thing that I would do is I'd look at all the outputs to make sure that I understood, do I take calls? Do I take leads? Do I make people click a button? Do I do whatever? And figure out what that event is on the website that essentially is where all my money goes to. So what does your funnel look like? I'd make sure I have an understanding from top to bottom in terms of where all the data flows from and is it correct? Because a lot of times when you dig in 2 and 3 layers deep, you'll find small instances of where the data might not be correct at first. And so let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say that, it's an inbound call business. I would go and I'd say, okay, well, we want more phone calls. We've identified our traffic segment that's the biggest one. And then I literally would double the size of the phone number and run a test. And my guess is that you guys, if you did something as simple as that, everyone in this room would be a rock star so fast you wouldn't even. I mean, the gains that you can see from testing and how big of an impact you can have on its business from a profitability perspective is, I can't stress it enough.
Extraordinary. It's simply extraordinary. Like, it doubles the size of a business if you get it right.
Yep. No, that's a great question. And that's why I go back to the math stuff, because there's statistical significance calculators that are built into most testing tools. And so why I have 35 different segments or 40 different segments is some of the tests that we run might only have a few hundred visits a day or a week. And those tests just take longer to run to be able to get statistical significance. And so that's why I'm saying, I'd start with the highest area of your traffic and figure out what it is. And if you have a really small business and it doesn't make sense to segment at all, then, but you need to drive phone calls, then I wouldn't even bother to segment. I would just say, okay, hey, look, I know that I need more phone calls. My phone number is hidden and too small on my site. Make it twice as big, have an A/B tool that integrates with it, and go. And my educated guess is it will be a positive result.
Right, and I one way where you can segment where if you don't have a lot of traffic, and you probably should be, is mobile and desktop. So you're having different experiences for both, for consumers for both, because they're just going to behave so differently.
I will say one mistake I see low traffic sites make when they start testing is waiting too long for a very small lift. And so one of the things that you have to think about when you're running a testing program is tests take time, and that means per year, given a segment, you only have a couple swings. And so you want to use those effectively. You don't want to do one test a year, because given that most tests are inconclusive or fail, and that's the truth, one test a year, it's going to be a long time till you get a win. 10 tests a year, you're guaranteed a win in that year. 50 tests a year, you're guaranteed multiple wins in that year. Thousands you can see how that changes, and it really, your limited traffic will limit the number of tests per year you can run. So you have to be very disciplined. When you're seeing a 1.5% lift on something, you're like, ooh, if I just wait, 6 months or 7 months, maybe this will reach statistical significance, it's not worth the opportunity cost of not running another high value test to wait for that. So we recommend with the lowest traffic sites to not run tests longer than a month. Higher traffic sites that can do segments where they can run tests for multiple months because they're testing at higher velocity elsewhere, that's fine. But for lower traffic tests, just make sure that you're kind of cutting and moving on to the next test and not wasting too much time on something that's not going to drive meaningful value for your business.
And one other thing, I've made this mistake in the past too. You do see swings in the data. So you might run a test and out of the chute, it's like 60% up and you're like, throw it live, we're done. And then like the next week you see everything kind of come back to center. And so, I like the idea of, don't let it wrong. You have to call a test at a certain point, but let it run its course as much as you can that makes sense for the business, because you could make an incorrect decision if you just kind of go gut real fast on unstatistically significant data.
Yeah, we say the data has to be valid and the sample has to be representative. And so Monday is not representative of your traffic. So we'd say, if you have wild fluctuations in day-to-day behavior, definitely run a test a week. If you're testing during Christmas, either continue to test or retest once a holiday ends. Like, you have to think about how representative is this traffic that I'm testing to my average user in this segment.
What level of certainty do you get to, like 95%, 98%? Have you seen things where you've implemented at 95% and then data comes, you get more data over time and no, that test was actually wrong in the test result?
So we look at it with the confidence bounds as well. And so you could have, my math is going to be off here, but I'll just make it so essentially what I mean is a lot of the testing tools, or at least the ones that I've used, whether it's Adobe or Optimizely, they have kind of a bound of significance. So they could say, hey, this is -2% to 10% up. And so if you're at 95% statistical significance, you're essentially saying a certain percentage of the time it will be less than good, and then a certain percentage of the time it will be better than good. So we kind of look at the bound along with the statistical significance calculator and make decisions based off that. If the bounds is too wide, we'll let it run farther to make sure that we feel it's kind of solid data set. If we see a wide bounds, but I'll make an example. So let's say we're at 80% significance, but the bounds are plus 10% to plus 50%, then you're much more likely to say, hey, it's a wide range, but it's going to be good. So just stop the test and kick it live and then continue. The other thing that we do is we're never done. And so the one that I'm showing you right here, this was actually a tie for something else that we did because I won't tell you exactly why, but it was. And so we're already running another version of this now, so that it's never really kind of like you wait and watch and then see. We actually run consistent tests all the time to have always continuous improvement.
Yeah, and I would be wary of we put some up here, so maybe we're guilty of it, but there are a lot of case studies online, like how I tripled my conversion rate in just one test. And what you have to know is that your statistical significance measure does not tell you that you're going to see 83% lift. It tells you that one is statistically more likely to be higher than the other. And so it doesn't tell you necessarily, depending on the statistics you use, the level of lift, but that there is a lift. So when we do forward-looking projections, if we see a test with 80% conversion rate, we're not going to propose that, if you turn that live, your business is going to grow by 80%. We take a more conservative approach and take kind of towards the lower bound of your confidence interval. So we maybe take 50% of that and we say, okay, you're going to expect to see a 40% lift over the next year. And that's a conservative way to forward project sort of that incremental revenue. So just kind of level set your expectations. This is where I agree math and stats people come in handy, because a lot of this and even the tools can make you do a lot of evil if you don't know the right way to interpret and apply the statistics to your business. So really get somebody that has an understanding of how to appropriately apply those business stats, or get that understanding yourself.
Yeah, to your question earlier, you're the marketer. Go hire the math guy or woman, sorry, to do the dirty work on the test stuff, because it is not easy at all. So let's keep going here. We've got another 10 minutes of this, and then advanced tape drive calls before. No, I think can we go the other way? Okay, and then here's another version that we did. This one again drove calls, but you'll notice one of the big differences is it says call now in that orange button. It also has an icon. Again, small, subtle things actually have all of that's been tested, and actually works. I think in one of the businesses that I've worked on previously, that little phone icon-y thing had like a 9% lift on driving more calls. I mean, again, big high volume businesses has massive impact on total bottom line. Let's see what else. Next. Something that everyone in this room hates going to a website and getting, a pop-up. Again, these are the things that work. And again, I'm just giving you and one of the things you'll notice here is we've definitely tested click the button versus call right from here. And it's, free things that we do for you. We give you a credit consultation. We give you your TransUnion report. We do all these free things. And then call. This actually is already iterated on top of and changing the color of the phone number because it blends in too much. But again, modal pop-ups work. We've tested time delays on modal pop-ups. Do you do it immediately when the person hits the site so they literally can't do anything until the modal? Do you have a 5-second delay? Do you test scroll depths? I mean, these are all like how...
Behavior-driven is another one, like exit intent. Are they about to leave?
So again, our philosophy is always let the data do the talking and don't allow for words like I feel or I think because, and maybe that's just us being weird, but in general, when the data tells you the data will help you tell the story if you're looking at it correctly and you can interpret it correctly.
Right, and the way to bring the discipline, like I do this with my team, is we place bets before tests that we're excited about. And you can really see that I feel doesn't matter after that.
We make clients score their tests, and that's the way we prioritize them. And they're scored on 3 factors that are objective, which are somewhat objective. The potential, the impact, and the level of effort. These are kind of business-related metrics that people in test, and then we force everybody to mark how much they love the test idea. So we've decided to measure how that ego bias comes into play, and we basically found no correlation between how much you like something and whether or not it's going to win. So it helps sort of objectively take that I like this or I want or I think out of the picture.
And something else I'll tell this room is don't ever get your executive team involved in your testing because they will generally tell you to do things and look at things based on opinion versus fact. I've seen it before, and so we generally just do our work, make sure that it's within brand guidelines, and then kind of show results afterwards in terms of what the P&L looks like. And I've always found that they like how the P&L looks much better than what the test looks like.
I will say that can be a luxury for some organizations.
I actually would say that is
totally
a
fair.
luxury.
Yeah. And so what we found is get them involved and make them feel like the things that they like get to be tested at least every now and then. And when they start seeing winning and losing, they start to give more trust to the team because they see that maybe they don't know anything. So a lot of teams don't have the luxury of that, although it's amazing. I know Beth might have more to say on that too.
I don't have that luxury. Yeah. That's all. So I think we have, probably about 10 to 15 minutes. Do people have questions? Like, what have we not talked about today that you want to know about?
What do you bet? When you're betting, do you bet like money? Do you bet?
We've done surveys. We've done names on the wall, and that's kind of what we do. But what I wanted to really teach the team is, your gut's not right here. Like, you have to test. What has helped the team and what helped me is there's a site called Which Test One, and I actually say after a year of reading it, my gut actually got a lot better at that. So if you're not getting that newsletter, you should sign up and get that newsletter. It's free. If you want to go back into the archives, it costs something. It's called Which Test One.
I bet my team steaks one day because I was so confident on what was going to win, and I ended up buying a steak lunch.
Yeah, and it's something I think about. Rewards can be really important because, as I said, a lot of tests lose and a lot of tests are inconclusive. And so if you're starting a testing program, tell this story, very quickly. I went through 10 months of losing tests. I lost 10 tests in a row. They were genius. My best work, and they just flat loser. And the team was starting to lose momentum. The executive team was starting to get bored with all of our testing. But then we got a win that paid for the program and more, 3 times over. And that's when you go out for sushi and sake and everybody goes out and really celebrates, because keeping that discipline up in the face of inconclusive or negative data can be really demoralizing. So finding ways to reward the discipline is really important.
And I would add on to that too. We always take an approach of you're never losing, because by losing, you're actually winning because you learned something. And as long as you're always learning, regardless of what the data shows, you know where to go next. And so if that kind of gives you that energy into, okay, well, where do we go from here? Then we almost think of, if we can lose some, then we're actually doing a good job, because it's telling us something that users didn't want to do.
Yep.
So.
Does there ever come a point where you say to the client or whatever, you need to improve the value of your offer, forget about the tests?
Absolutely. So there are clients that come to us that are not ready for optimization and need innovation. So they are pre-product fit. They don't have a market, or they don't know where that market is. Their paid acquisition channels aren't set up. And really testing can be a way to explore and learn those things, but it can't build a business for you. And so there can be times where it is a learning tool for you, but it's not going to drive the same types of predictable value as it will for a company that can really benefit from optimization.
A related question. If you add more free items, is there a limit at which it's detrimental?
I don't know, but I would test it.
You have 4 free things.
The interesting thing is the answer is truly maybe, and it depends on your audience. And it could
that's
work
why you
for
need to test.
Yeah, it could work for you and not work for me. We've seen trust icons, put them on e-commerce site number 1, and everybody's converting and everybody's feeling great. Put trust icons on e-commerce site number 2, and they're like, why should I worry about trust? And they start thinking, maybe I should be concerned. And the conversion rate goes down. I mean, it's really not predictable until you test with your users in your channels.
Well, and it will be different. It could be different for different channels. Like every place I've worked, what I have found is we need different landing pages for different channels. And, if you're having to search different landing pages for different keyword groups. Yeah.
How does this affect mobile testing?
Huge.
So let's repeat the question. So the question is,
sorry.
how does this impact mobile? And huge is actually the right answer. So I will let you take it from there.
When we look at mobile, very different than desktop. We take a strategy of, when designing for mobile, it's mobile first versus desktop first responsive design, and then you end up with a mobile site. If you don't have responsive developers, I would definitely do landing pages that are, this is me. Again, I have luxury of resources, but I would do mobile first strategies. With how much Facebook is actually pushing towards advertising, if you're advertising on Facebook at all, or you're increasing your spend on Facebook, their audience is so mobile focused that, and the amount of traffic that you can get from them makes it so that you have to be focused on mobile, especially with traffic that comes from social sites like Facebook. You probably, I don't know, can you segment mobile and desktop inside of, and I might be putting you on the spot.
All of the testing tools allow you to segment mobile and desktop, segment by channel. Some at more advanced can let you segment by geolocation, campaign. There's a lot of segmentation opportunities. The thing to think about with mobile is the browsing behavior is just vastly different. And if you're thinking about removing distraction, you have such more limited real estate to get that value proposition across and get that call to action in front of the user. You have to be really efficient with your design and your copy.
And, mobile, if you have a call center and you're driving to calls, is a really good place to kind of do a click-to-call landing page, too. That's one of the things that we have found that has worked. I can't emphasize enough that mobile traffic's less. If you can make mobile traffic work, make it work.
I'll give you a good gem for you advanced affiliates that are looking for that next thing. We actually found a way, when you hit the number on an iPhone and you actually can... You click it and it says, "Are you sure you want to place this call?" We've actually figured out ways to make that pop on the page load so that the consumer they can literally make a call from right there when they're not even having to click on a phone number. And that's super ridiculous and things that we've tested. But on mobile, if you have a call-based business on mobile, seriously look at your ratio between how many people are filling, like who in this room loves to fill out forms on your mobile phone? Right, exactly. We're all laughing as we ask the question, right? So if you have a business that takes forms and calls, you already know the answer is like be more call specific and where your phone numbers sit. And the other one too, as I would say, is on mobile is as you're testing, look at your device. How does the page actually load on your phone? Can you see the calls to action? Can you actually look at it on? And there's tools out there that can actually help with loading the landing page that you want to test in the different formats of the devices.
Yeah, your browser, like Chrome, will do that for you. So it's an easy, cheap way to test that.
Sure.
So just when you mentioned Facebook, so can you maybe talk a bit about different funnels, SEO, Facebook, social, first clicks, second clicks, what?
Sure.
So the question was?
Yeah, sorry. The question was, can you talk? I talked about Facebook. Can you talk a little bit more about funnels relating to traffic and things of that nature and what we've done? So the three areas, I think if I was going to say, so if you have a high traffic business or a business that gets enough traffic and you're going to be testing, the way that I would think about the 6 types of areas that I would look at is what does my brand traffic look like if you have a brand? What does my non-branded traffic look like? And then what does my kind of social traffic look like? And then I would take those 3 places and then I would divide them by desktop and mobile. I don't know, do you have?
Yeah, I think I think your segmentation depends on basically where you're making money, right? So you'll have to look at what segments drive the most money for me and how do I slice that. I think from a funnel perspective, the things that we think about is continuity of experience. And so if you're coming from a paid search ad, one of the easiest things to test is making sure your headline aligns with your best click-through ad text and creating continuity there. Or if people are coming from Facebook and you know they're coming from Facebook, promoting more social sharing elements or social proof from Facebook and really providing them sort of that continuity of experience is really good. And then something we haven't talked about that I think is really important to understand that's an add-on value of A/B testing and conversion optimization is it can really help with SEO because it helps with your on-site experience, which is such a large part of how you get ranked. And so as you increase your conversion rate and engagement with these landing pages, as you reduce bounce rate, you'll see benefits in SEO as well, which is something a lot of teams don't measure, but can actually be very meaningful.
Okay, so I actually will be please devil's advocate to that a little bit. So I actually think that the top of the funnel, that click-through rate on Facebook or native or SCM or wherever you are, that metric you can move incredibly effectively with ad testing. By the time you do all your ad testing and then you do what we call internally echo messaging, but kind of matching the headline, matching that experience, sometimes it slows you down. Like in SEM, it might work, you're bidding on different keywords, but in Facebook, where you need to constantly be testing, we actually find that moving the ad unit and the click-through rate is much more impactful than lining up everything. So you really do need to look at it by channel and by funnel.
Yeah, and not forget that there's a cost to testing. And
Exactly.
There's a resource cost, there's a technology cost, there's an opportunity cost. And so people often underestimate the investment you have to make in testing and what types of tests you do. So ad text testing can be very low effort if you can get a lot of copy written. Redesigning a page like you have done can be very high effort because it requires user experience and design and development, and it can get
Or
very
you can
complicated.
hire a clearance company.
Or you can hire us, and it's just super easy. It just magically happens. So thinking about return on investment, not just thinking about the return, but also thinking about the investment and where best to deploy that investment, I think is very, very valuable.
Yeah, one other thing I would say on that as well is, and this is just super advanced, but something I've seen in the past is on Facebook specifically, Facebook uses their own browser, as you know, to kind of load your page, test your landing page in Facebook's browser, because I've seen super wonky things that happen in Facebook's browser that don't necessarily happen on other browsers. For example, we found it for Facebook last year that you couldn't actually place a phone call out of their browser on an iOS device. It actually canceled the call every time you hit the button, and so there's all sorts of wonkiness in there.
So when you guys are making changes to landing pages and testing them, do you find it works better to sort of compare two largely different pages, or do you slowly make incremental little differences and optimize it as you go?
So we've actually measured this in our data and seen whether incremental or radical makes more changes. Now, what's interesting is radical is more likely to be called a win, but the lift is not actually any higher than what you see in the incremental lift. So I think people are more likely to misuse statistics when it's a big change because they want to see that change win. So there can be, they both are effective tactics. Incremental can be a very effective tactic for high volume, high traffic sites that can do a lot of testing. So we worked with a client who did 50 headline tests a month across 5 landing pages. And it was headline in red, headline with strikeout text in blue, like just every iteration. And that was incredibly effective for them. For a lower traffic site, I think you're better served by taking larger swings and looking for bigger wins because you just don't have as much testing velocity available to you. But really, our data shows that they kind of perform equally at a very high average.
Yeah, and I was going to say, in this case here that you saw, that was the two different ones that we had. We were debating going through kind of a redesign. And before we wanted to kind of go down the path of a redesign, we wanted to test what that could look like potentially and make sure that if we radically changed the look and feel of it, that it would fall within inside of, it wouldn't destroy the site. I was a part of a brand campaign historically, and we literally spent over $1 million with a brand agency to redesign the website. And I watched it just destroy the economics of the company. Down by 40%. It looked beautiful, but beautiful doesn't always win.
We have time for one more question. Okay.
How useful can competition be in finding inspiration for ideas and testing?
Actually, when we're starting a new project with a new business, I look at the competitors and what they're doing, and I go back and I use the Internet Archive and look at those pages to see kind of what they've done. I can figure out who's testing by that, and I can take some best guesses. That's where I start.
I agree. I think competitive analysis is a really great resource for building hypotheses, as long as you don't presume that what your competitor is doing will work for your customers. Even if you're in the same vertical, even if you're advertising in the same channel, test it. What we've seen some teams make the mistake of is just copying their competitor and saying, oh, this will work. It's working for them. They tested it on basically our same customers. I'm going to push it live, and that doesn't really work. And so it's a great resource for inspiration and hypotheses, but still test it.
And I would definitely look at kind of corollary verticals. So, if, for instance, if you're in mortgage, maybe look at insurance.
Yeah.
And see what they're doing for ideas and figure out who's actually spending money on traffic and who's actually testing, because those are the pages you want to learn from.
And you can take inspiration from wildly different types of sites too. I think e-commerce does pop-up modals really, really well. And so you can look at e-commerce sites and start to snap inspiration for how they capture email. It's not the same thing, but people are really innovating and iterating and testing in a lot of different types of industries. And so anytime you're on a website and you see something interesting that's captured your attention, that can be an opportunity for hypothesis.
I'll give you a super advanced one that I've used. There's actually, I think it's called Nerdy Data. Does anyone know it? It's a search engine that you can actually search code. And so Nerdy Data, I think is what it is. I've actually taken the JavaScript from different testing platforms and used that to find out which sites actually have testing JavaScript on them. And then I'll look at those sites to see what they're doing to make sure that I know that they're testing, not just thinking about that they have a good-looking site, but who's actually doing the work.
Yeah, builtwith.com will also give you that information.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the one I was trying to think of. I couldn't remember it. That was built with.
.com. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, there is an add-on for Girl that does the same thing. Just find
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific. We are out of time, but everybody, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very
We
much.
all hope this was helpful.